It begins on its own terms, a story that threatens an entire model of dependency, one that has lasted for decades. If this matters for Africa's future, press like and stay for the full brief. If you're watching from a farming family, type your city below. Let's see who still believes in soil. As irrigation channels begin to fill with new life, another current moves quietly across the world. Questions, fears, calculations. Could this $9 billion water alliance truly bring Africa's green revolution, or will it open a new trade front the West cannot control? At sunrise, the convoy rolled quietly into the town of Lumbila, just 15 kilometers from Ouagadougou. Engineers in blue coveralls unloaded crates marked Barrett Water Tech, Solar Flow System. Inside each crate lay the dream that once transformed India's own parched plains, a network of intelligent irrigation valves and solar-powered water hubs, the core of Burkina Faso's $9 billion partnership with New Delhi. The official announcement came at a ceremony streamed live across the Sahel. Traoré's speech was brief, measured, proud. For generations, the hand that fed us was not our own. Today, we water the earth ourselves. Behind him stood rows of young Burkina Faso technicians, graduates trained through India's Green Corridor Fellowship, experts in precision irrigation, soil mapping, and digital water sensors. They would now lead 12 mega-project zones stretching from Bobo Dioulasso to Dori. The scale is staggering. 1.2 to 2 million hectares of farmland linked by 9,000 kilometers of smart canals, each powered by solar fields producing over 600 megawatts. The alliance includes a long-term agricultural credit facility, $2 billion in low-interest financing for local cooperatives, ensuring control of the land stays in Burkina Faso's hands. This is not charity. This is design. The deal was signed not in Paris, not in Washington, but in Ouagadougou, with Indian engineers shaking hands with African farmers. For both nations, it marks a new era of mutual independence. India gains agricultural corridors for trade and technology exports. Burkina gains food sovereignty and water security. But for Western observers, the alliance is something else, a potential crack in their century-old influence over Africa's food economy. European seed and fertilizer corporations had long dominated Burkina's rural markets, tying products to conditional credits. Now, with India's arrival, that grip begins to loosen. The Wall Street Journal described it as a shift from soft aid to hard strategy. An EU analyst called it a new green belt outside Western reach. Locals, however, reacted emotionally. Crowds gathered near irrigation sites just to see the first channels open. An old woman dipped her hand into the running water and whispered, "It has been 50 years since the soil spoke back." For farmers across the Sahel, this is more than infrastructure. It is identity. Every drop flowing through these pipes tells a new story: dignity, control, self-respect. But the new partnership raises questions. India's stake in Africa is growing fast, from energy to defense, from mining to agriculture. Could this simply replace one dependency with another? Or is it truly an alliance of equals, nations once colonized now building together? Traoré appears unmoved by speculation. Calmly, he says, partnership is not surrender. It is the sharing of strength. Then a warning that echoes, when Africa waters its fields, no one else decides the harvest. The images from satellites now show a new pattern emerging. Grids of green spreading like veins through the Sahel. Each square represents not only a new crop, but a new kind of sovereignty. In New Delhi, newspapers call it the Great Sahel Project. In Washington, it is studied as a potential strategic realignment. But for most in Burkina Faso, it is simpler. Proof that the nation's future will no longer depend on rainfall or foreign mercy. Hold the line. Write one word that captures what this moment means to you. Behind the optimism lies tension. Trade analysts warn that global supply routes may soon be redrawn. If India becomes the Sahel's primary partner in agricultural infrastructure, Europe could lose billions in seed and export contracts. Western think tanks speak of market destabilization, but ordinary Africans call it long-delayed justice. As Burkina's pumps hum through the night and canals carve paths across the desert, another current forms, political, invisible, unstoppable. Diplomats in Brussels and Washington call for emergency trade assessments. What are they afraid this alliance might unleash? The first sign came not from Africa, but from Brussels. Inside a closed-door meeting at the European Commission, an internal memo warned, the Burkina-India Irrigation Accord may accelerate the erosion of European agricultural influence in the Sahel corridor within 36 months. Across the Atlantic, Washington analysts were equally cautious. A policy brief from the Atlantic Council read, India is positioning itself as Africa's alternative development partner, not through debt, but through water. The old system of dependency was under threat. Meanwhile, the IMF quietly postponed 2 upcoming reviews on Sahel farming programs once tied to European fertilizer imports. The timing was no coincidence. In Ouagadougou, Traoré remained calm. Beneath a blazing afternoon sun, he said, every nation that wants Africa to remain thirsty should remember this. The river changes course when the dam breaks. His words spread across social media within hours. Across Africa, hashtags began trending. Water is freedom, a green Sahel. In New Delhi, engineers and diplomats toasted to what they called a southward monsoon. India's prime minister declared, this is not aid, it is alignment. For the first time, 2 post-colonial nations were shaping a partnership on their own terms, built not on pity, but parity. Western media coverage grew sharper. One French outlet asked, is India replacing France in West Africa? Another warned, Burkina Faso may be creating a dependency that looks different but feels the same. But on the ground, those words felt hollow. Farmers who once waited for seasonal rainfall now managed smartphone dashboards showing soil moisture in real time. Children who once fetched water from distant wells now attend irrigation schools built beside solar farms. One village elder said, the white dust that once covered our roofs has turned to green mist. For the first time, we smell rain before it falls. The human impact is unmistakable. Fields barren for decades shimmer with life. Wheat, rice, vegetables flow into domestic markets. National grain reserves increased by 32% in 6 months. Prices stabilized. Confidence returned. Yet the deeper transformation is psychological. For generations, Africans were told that food security required Western assistance. Now proof of self-reliance runs through the fields like veins of light. If this moment speaks to you, share your first reaction in 1 sentence. Do you see hope or risk in this alliance? As optimism spreads, subtle counter-moves begin. Western trade envoys propose monitoring frameworks for water and land projects. European banks offer fresh lines of credit with technical supervision clauses. Traoré declines. Our soil will no longer be audited from abroad. That line becomes a rallying cry. Crowds gather in Ouagadougou, waving buckets of water, chanting, we audit ourselves. Water becomes more than a resource. It is a declaration of independence. Yet beneath the celebrations, tension pulses. Western companies freeze certain supply contracts. Logistical slowdowns appear at border checkpoints. The world's invisible networks test Burkina's resolve. Traoré remains unfazed. We have waited too long for permission to grow. Now we will simply grow. Analysts whisper this is no longer just irrigation. It is a birth of a new trade front, redrawing alliances across continents. India's engineers are building corridors of influence, not just canals. The West, once unchallenged, suddenly finds itself out of position. Still, the greater story is not rivalry, but renewal. The fields speak louder than any headline. As dusk falls across the Sahel, the sound of flowing water carries a single truth. The future is already here, and it is green. But if water is power, who will hold the valves? And what happens when the first harvest proves the world wrong? In the months that follow, the transformation is measured not only in tons of grain, but in quiet pride. The Sahel, long treated as the edge of survival, becomes a frontier of rebirth. Local cooperatives form at an unprecedented pace. Villages merge farmland into massive irrigation clusters powered by Indian solar panels. Young men return from seasonal labor. Women operate digital pumps by touchscreen. Migration slows. Schools reopen. Markets revive. With Burkina produce, not imports. Each green field whispers, We belong to the land again. The alliance with India shifts West African diplomacy. Once dictated by France and the IMF, water and crop policies now take inspiration from Ouagadougou. Traoré's Green Belt vision spreads like wildfire across the Sahel. Ministers in Mali, Niger, Chad look to Burkina Faso as a model. The age of aid is closing. The age of partnership begins, a delegate remarks. Approval ratings soar. Food self-sufficiency rises 38% in a fiscal year. Local radio programs broadcast water bulletins, not warnings, but updates. Yet progress brings pressure. Western trade missions return, offering joint supervision programs. Traoré declines. Independent management becomes official policy. With independence comes responsibility. Maintaining $9 billion in irrigation requires discipline, transparency, local accountability. Traoré addresses this. Sovereignty is not the end of struggle. It is its beginning. The crowd erupts, chanting his name, yet his tone remains grave. We must protect this gift from corruption, from carelessness, from forgetting why we started. If you believe Africa's strength lies in its own hands, press like. If you disagree, tell us why. Soon, the new irrigation corridors reshape politics beyond Burkina Faso. Regional parties adopt slogans inspired by the alliance: water before debt, soil before sanctions. Across the Sahel, debates over resource control take center stage. For the first time in decades, water, not gold, not oil, becomes the new axis of power. International observers call it hydro-sovereignty, the ability to use water as both shield and sword in the struggle for self-reliance. Yet resistance brews. European think tanks lobby for market oversight. Private companies seek loopholes. Contracts freeze or redirect. Traoré's response is firm. All agricultural data will be stored on servers inside Burkina Faso. Our fields will not be managed from the cloud. The spiritual dimension cannot be ignored. Imams, pastors, and village elders speak of the miracle of water. Maybe God waited until we found courage to help ourselves, a priest says. By mid-year, satellite images confirm the Green Revolution. Nearly 400,000 hectares of desert turned green. But the true measure is invisible. It lives in hearts believing the future can be grown, not borrowed. Abroad, counter-offers begin. Europe, the US, China prepare strategies. The irrigation deal is no longer regional. It is global. Analysts call it the Green Corridor Challenge. Nations using infrastructure, not ideology, to realign power. Behind the rhetoric lies concern. American agritech firms see contracts halved. European producers face tariffs on water technology. India frames the alliance as moral partnership. Proof two former colonies can trade dignity for dignity. The message resonates across the global south. When nations share water, they no longer trade chains. Skepticism persists. Western think tanks warn of long-term political costs. Some suggest the U.S. needs its own green initiative. The irony is clear. Decades of encouraging African self-reliance, now labeled destabilizing. China recalibrates. Africa's green race will decide who owns tomorrow's water. U.S. media shifts. Traoré is no longer rebel, but reformer, turning irrigation into independence. It's hard to oppose food and dignity. You can't sanction water, a former official admits. And the question deepens. If water diplomacy can realign the Sahel, what might energy, trade, or digital networks do next? The irrigation deal was never just about crops. It signals a deeper geopolitical tide. How long can one small nation hold its course between great powers? And what will Traoré do when the next offer comes, one no leader has yet refused? As the sun lowers over the Sahel, canals shimmer gold. The land that once begged for mercy now breathes on its own. In a village near Zinari, a boy stands at the edge of the new canal. His grandfather hands him a seed. Plant it today so tomorrow no one can say we waited for rain. That single gesture explains what no report or headline can. It is not just irrigation. It is inheritance. Traoré's alliance with India becomes more than engineering. It is sovereignty built in furrows and calloused hands. Perhaps this is what frightens old powers most. Africa's quiet revolutions now begin with water, not war. For the US and Europe, the question remains, adapt to partnership, or cling to control. The next decade may not be defined by missiles, but by who can grow food and who must buy it. If this story gave you clarity, press like. If it challenged your view, write your counterpoint. Calm, fair, factual. In Burkina Faso, the first harvest from new canals is expected within 6 months. It will feed millions. And belief, the belief that a nation once dismissed as poor can turn deserts into gardens. As green spreads across the Sahel, one truth becomes clear. The future does not arrive. It is planted. If Ibrahim Traore's vision touched you tonight, share this story. Not for politics, but for memory. Because when people take back their land, they take back their voice. May every drop of water in the Sahel carry this message forward. Africa will not wait for permission to grow. Could this $9 billion irrigation alliance spark a new trade front? Perhaps, but maybe, just maybe, it has already sparked something far greater, the return of faith in Africa's own hands.